I'm Alex, and I have 5 super easy skate tricks for you that I believe just about anyone can learn pretty quickly. No ollies required, but you do need to be fairly comfortable actually on your board. First up, nose stalls are a fun one to play around with, and all you really need for them is a simple parking block or a curb. You can ollie into these, but this is going to be more of the slappy kind of way of doing them instead. I tend to put my front foot halfway up the nose concave, leaving a little room to move it further up the nose right as I'm getting onto the block. The back foot is really just used to stabilize the board from going too far forward, so keep your back foot kinda loose and with your weight off of it. You want your momentum centered above your board riding up to this, and only shifted forward onto your nose right as you're placing it onto the block. You'll also need to make sure you're getting all of your wheels off the ground while doing this one. Throwing your momentum forward right into the thing at the last second will help this happen naturally, opposed to if you kinda just try to ride all stiff into it. If you're leaning too far forward too early, you can totally get broke off on even a silly curb. Poop. Although this is a super basic trick, it's a really fun one to just mess around with, and you can do dozens of things out of a simple nose stall. Kick turns out are pretty easy, as well as shove-its and body varials, and eventually you can even try to get some flip tricks out. All of this will also be good prep for doing proper nose slides and tricks out of them later. Next up, I see a lot of people being more comfortable early on with either fakie shove-its or even nollie shove-its. When you're using the front of your board in the direction you're moving, it makes shove-its almost kind of want to happen naturally because of your momentum, compared to if you're doing them in regular stance where gravity is working against you a little bit more. Now, a pop shove-it is done a little bit differently, so this is going to be just how to do the more ground-based shove-it version. This is going to feel more natural for you either riding fakie or nollie, so up to you on that one, but you will be aiming for this magic point on the front of your board. In that little side pocket, you'll be using purely your toes right on that part to quickly rotate your board around. Your other foot doesn't really do much of anything, but it does need to be more off to the side of your board opposite of the way the shove-it is going, so that leg doesn't get in the way of the whole production. You don't even need to snap the nose of your board, just use that pocket to push your foot slightly down and out, and the board should naturally feel like it wants to spin around that way. Once you have that down, you can later try to start popping the trick, which has all kinds of variations, or you can try to do fakie or nollie big spins next, or just whip the trick around faster for a full 360. Sidebar real quick, I have 3 more easy tricks for you, but if you've made it this far and found these to be a little bit too easy, I recommend my recent advanced trick guide on the 1-foot nose grind. It's really not as hard as it looks. Now next up, the trick where your board ideally does nothing, the hippie jump. This can be used on anything where your board can go under the obstacle while you fly over it. The one and only secret of doing hippie jumps is placing both of your feet right over the bolts, and well, you know the next part, you just jump. If your foot is hanging just a little bit on the concave, it will cause the board to move just a bit, which you really want to avoid when you're doing this. When you're approaching the obstacle you want to go over, remember to always jump a little sooner rather than later. The number one way to get messed up on a hippie jump is to catch your feet on the obstacle on your way up, so never do that, always jump a bit earlier. If you jump right off your bolts to where the board doesn't shift off the ground or from side to side at all, the board will travel at the same speed your body's going. In the air, you'll have a brief moment to aim back for those bolts as you hopefully get both feet back on the thing. You can take hippie jumps higher as you get more comfortable with them, but there's really not a ton of variations to them. It's more a trick mostly reliant on how unique you use it in your environment, so find something cooler than this. Next, this is one of the harder ones of the bunch, but there's a cheat code way of getting into a Casper. Usually this is done by doing half of a kickflip and then landing into it, but this method only uses pressure from your front foot. I put my front foot toe covering up just one of the bottom bolts, making sure not to have too much of my foot on the board. The back foot goes on the corner of the opposite side. Just pressing strongly down on your front toe and removing your back foot makes the board just kind of flop over without having to pop. Then once you get your front foot under your board, you want to stiffen that leg to hold up the board off the ground while your back foot tries to land on your tail upside down. That'll take some practice. If your front foot is just kind of lazily on the ground while you're doing this, well, just don't. That isn't a trick, that's a bail. If you're having a hard time staying stationary while you're trying this, you can take the washers off your wheels if you have any and tighten down the bolt so that your wheels move less. Just don't tighten so much to where you might break a bearing. Once you start landing into the Casper, you do then have to figure out how to get out of the thing. It feels more natural to me to do a shove it out, but you can also learn to just flip your board right back over, similar to how you got into the trick. There's a bunch of weird combos you can do with Caspers, and that same pressure method of flipping your board over with your toe also sets you up for learning pressure underflips a bit later. And very last, it might be a no comply shove it, but it uses your back foot instead, so you might call this one a shove it foot plant. This trick you might accidentally be learning while you're trying regular pop shove-its. This one pretty much turns what would be a bail of that into a purposeful trick. I put my feet in the exact same position as where I put them for a backside pop shove-it, back foot on the toe side pocket, front foot anywhere under the bolts. This trick comes entirely from your back foot as you push and scoop it around, and your front foot hangs in the air to help guide the board on the way down. Your back foot, which is touching the ground, is not supposed to plop and wait there. You want that back foot to actually touch the ground for the least amount of time as possible. Think of it more like a spring to jump back on your board, not something you want to be standing on. If you leave your foot planted on the ground for too long, it can look kinda lame, and you definitely don't want to do this multi-foot dance either. Like the fakie or nollie shove-its I showed off before, try this one going fakie if you can't get the board to naturally 180 around regular. Once you get the hang of using your foot off your board to interact with the ground, you can learn many variations of this trick. You can start planting your foot on higher obstacles, or do entirely other tricks a bit differently than how you commonly see them. And that was it. Those are the 5 tricks I feel you could learn before the basic fundamentals of the ollie, kickflip, and so on. But those are obviously very, very important to learn next if you haven't. If you happen to enjoy this trick guide I put together and would like to see more, make sure to be vocal about it down in those comments. Boomstick Skateboarding is just one of the channels I operate. My other is called Boomstick Gaming. If you're a hardcore gamer who likes more in-depth deep dives into new game releases, I recommend checking that out as well. Now, if you happen to learn and get some of the tricks I explained in this, I would love to see your makes, so shoot a clip over to me at BoomstickAlex on Twitter, TikTok, or Instagram. Thanks for checking this out today, and I actually learned like 4 different tricks myself in the making of this one video, so also thanks for teaching me something in some kind of roundabout way. I'll see you next time.